Hey there, Val. How are you?
I'm doing so good, Dr. Tiff. How are you doing?
I am doing really well. It's Tuesday.
Yes, it is. And time for Tuesday Talk.
Tuesday talk. I feel like when Tuesday hits all day, I'm like, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Like that hump day commercial with the camel from
Yeah.
Geico. What day is it? What day is it? I'm like, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. I'm so excited every Tuesday.
Yeah, that's what's up. I can't, even though sometimes Tuesdays can drain me, having to start off from that Monday or whatever. By the time the evening gets here and it's time for our talk, like my energy level slowly starts to creep up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I was pretty wore out earlier today. And then as we got closer, I was like, yes, it's time.
Absolutely.
Well, we have another great episode tonight. Thanks for everybody joining us. We are actually also streaming live on YouTube now. So, in addition to Facebook and LinkedIn Live, now we have YouTube as well. So, giving everybody some options. So, this is episode 11. And our topic tonight, you want to tell them, Val? Give a little drum roll because I'm really excited about this one.
Give me the drum roll, girl. It is education. Either get it, get left behind, or get sped through.
That's right. And we are looking at student achievement versus state standards. And we kind of came up with that hook line because to us, as we were discussing this topic, it really is like the messaging to kids in school is like, okay, get this information I'm teaching you, or don't get it, or we'll get you some special ed services and see if we can push you through a little bit, reinforce some things, give you more time to learn things. And we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper tonight as well. So to jump us off, I asked Valerie this question. We plan our Tuesday talks every week. And I was like, girl, what are these pacing guides? I've heard teachers talk about it. I've seen them go into their planning time to work on it. I've heard them complain about it. I've heard others rave about it. So just explain what pacing guides are for anybody who's watching that might not know what it
Yeah.
is.
So pacing guides and their intention are exactly what they sound like. It's the pace at which the teacher is supposed to present and teach their curriculum or their state standards. And it's a guide for when things are supposed to be taught, like in what order are the standards, the concepts supposed to be taught in, and how long the teacher is supposed to spend approximately on each standard or on each concept. And I reemphasize its original intent was for it to be meant as a guide.
As a guide.
However,
Yes. And it has morphed into being more than that.
so much more. Like in some places, it has morphed into your Bible, like
Mm.
your teaching Bible, your lesson plans, your pace. Like if you said you were going to be on page 53 on February 28th, then when they walk in the room, you better be on page 53 on that day. If not, we got problems. That's what it has morphed into.
Wow. And when you say when they walk into the room, who's they?
But they are administration in the building, or it could be central office staff who decided to come and walk through and take a peek at what you're doing.
Mm. So it's like a way for them to look and know ahead of time where you should be at this point in the school year. And then they come in to kind of check to make sure that's where you are. So it seems to me like the school year starts off as a race. It's like ready, set, go to see
Yeah.
who can get through the curriculum and the pacing guide on time or maybe a little bit early as students get ready for that end of year testing. Is that a good way to kind of sum it up?
Yeah, it really it always intrigues me because in essence, when you think about educating students or kids, you're educating them so that they learn something, they get exposed to different ideas, and They find the path that they want to take, the things that they're interested in, so they can explore it deeper. But the deeper kind of doesn't happen because we're trying to race through and make sure we cover everything or we get through everything in the name of I prepared you for this high stakes assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then as you think about it, it almost could, in the positive light, feel like as a new teacher, I'm right out of school, I finished my student teaching, I in my classroom my first year. This seems like a really good thing. I don't have to guess where my students should be. This pacing guy is going to show me exactly what I need to be teaching at the exact moment. But from what I hear you saying is there's not a lot of wiggle room with it. So if my students are, we have that human factor when we are dealing with kids. Some are out sick. We have school activities, um, who knows, class, field trips, whatever. So whoever is developing these pacing guides, are they taking those things into account? Or is it just kind of counting the number of days in the school year, looking at the material that should be covered by the end of the school year, and just saying this is how far you should get at this point?
I really wish I knew who birthed this idea. Um, and I mean, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that it's bad. Again, I think based on the original intent, it's a great idea. Like you said, if I'm a brand new teacher, I know brand new teachers and have known them every year almost that I've been teaching. And they are grateful and thankful that they have something to go by. It's
Mhm.
just that the something to go by in some places, there's such a strictness put on it
Mhm.
that it does not account for the brand new young teacher fresh out of college or the new teacher who hasn't gone through an education program that doesn't have very good classroom management skills yet because they didn't know what to expect.
Mm.
Um, or they didn't realize that the majority of the students in their classroom are really 3 or 4 grade levels behind. And
Mhm.
so, how do I catch them up and stay on this pacing guide when I have so much ground to cover already?
Yeah, yeah. So then, in your experience being in the schools, middle school, high school level, are there any repercussions when you are not on pacing guide, when they come into the classroom and you're a couple weeks behind where you should be? Do you have any experience sipping the tea? Do you have any experience with what the reaction is when you're not on track according to the pacing guide?
I do. Um, and I say it that way because I have quite a bit experience. So I'm that teacher that I don't stay on the pacing guide. And one of the reasons, what the biggest reason for that is because I believe in the importance of the student learning. And so, as the teacher in the room, I feel like if I just went through something with them and they didn't get it, like if the majority of the students didn't get it, I don't feel good just continuing on and acting like, well, we already covered that, so you're gonna have to get what you can get.
Mhm.
Um, and so yes, I have experience in that. However, in that experience, I've had a ton of success. So I remember there was one year early in my career where I was teaching ninth grade and we were on semesters. There were 6 units in the curriculum. I got through unit 4, and they, my administrators, had a complete fit about it. I got talked to so many times, I got called into so many meetings. Well, when my students took the test, they had the highest scores in the building.
Wow.
And the other teachers either got through unit 5 or they got all the way through unit 6.
Mm, that says a lot.
Yeah,
Says a lot. So even though you were behind schedule according to the pacing guide, your kids demonstrated their knowledge and learning of the concepts or the subjects that you taught on the assessment.
they did. They did. It's one of those, it's the contradicting thoughts of, do you cover everything so that they've been exposed to all the material, or do you cover enough things in depth that the things you covered, when they see that on the test, they're more likely to get that right and
Mm.
therefore do well still. So, and there's a thin line. I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, but it does really depend on you as the teacher. And
Mhm.
so we got a question here from Tyrell, and it says, what has been your greatest teaching success so far? And shout out to him. He is actually one of my former students. So thanks, sweetie. Love you still to this day. And so to answer that question, I would say, when I teach the kid. So that means if in the middle of teaching them how to solve an equation, I see that that kid is not in the right mindset, the right mind frame, something's going on, then solving equations takes a back seat. And
Mm.
because I take the time to do that, again, that goes back to Tiffany, building relationships,
Yep. Yep.
then that actually speeds things up later. Like once that kid knows that you understand them, you're interested in them and who they are and how they feel, man, you'll get 10 times more work out of them. I promise.
Yeah.
So I feel like, Tyrell, that's my greatest teaching success so far and in the future. That's who I want to be as a teacher.
I love that. I like that you were able to recognize, would you say it was early on in your teaching career or later on, the importance of those relationships?
It was very early. Um, and I was really blessed to have gone through a really good new teacher professional development cohort program
Right.
that kind of embedded those things in me early. So yeah,
Hmm.
early on.
So on this pacing guide, are there blocks of time designated for relationship building with your students? There must be.
There, there are blocks of time that tell you these are the standards you hit.
And how much flexibility do you as a teacher and as a team have with altering the pacing guides?
Now that just really depends on your administration. So I've been in both groups. Um, I have been in places where it's been like I can create my own, and because I created it, it's very flexible. Just kind of go back through it every so often and update it to let us know where you are and how where you're trying to get to. And then I've been on the other side where the state says this, and so this is what should be happening. So I need a plan for how you're going to get from where you are behind, and you're going to speed the kids up to get to where they need to be.
Hmm. So you have a magic wand. Is that what I'm hearing?
I do. I do. It's at the front of the room. A lot of times I use it to write on the board, and then I can extend it and I can just, wave it around.
Catch everybody up. It sounds to me like, just in your example there of the leadership that is very rigid about the pacing guide, that perhaps there's a lack of trust in the teachers, from the trust from leadership to the teachers. Because if I feel like I need to make you adhere to this pacing guide that was laid out by somebody who does not know the students in your classroom, then I feel like I can't trust your teaching expertise, your recommendations. So I need to make sure you stay on track. Is that, she's sipping that tea again? Must be a good answer coming.
You know what? I tell my students, like, if I got a really, I might not need to tell my secret, but if I got a really like in-depth conversation I gotta have, like especially with them, like if I know they about to tell me some stuff,
Yeah.
hold on, let me get my crackers. Hold on, let me go get my vanilla.
Oh,
So it's I do think that that's a part of it. But I don't think it's the biggest part. I really think it's just the fact that from their perspective, there are things and people on top of them too
mhm.
that are pushing mandates down, and there's a lot of things that they can't control either. But I do feel like education has really become a numbers system
Mhm.
instead of a learning system, because every decision, that data driven, that's the law of the land. But there are some things that the data that's being taken
Mhm.
does not measure. You know what I mean? So I do believe that for the most part, they are doing what they think is best based on the situation that they're in, based on what's been handed down to them as well.
Yeah, for sure. And we just got a comment on Facebook. There's nothing like experience to help tweak a pacing guide. You learn which elements may be more difficult for students to grasp and those that are easier. Then you can carve out more time for what's needed. So Yoshi Dunn seems like a veteran, seasoned teacher.
Yes, she is. She is fabulous. And that's true. So, especially for, we talked about the new teachers earlier. That's one factor for them that they don't quite have or know yet that a veteran teacher, could help them with. But it is, so in some places, it's called power standards. What are the
Mhm.
most important things? Tests are broken down into percentages for different sections of the content. And so we learn to look at, well, which content has the highest percentage on the test. Okay, we'll
Mhm.
spend a little more time there. What has the lowest? We'll make sure we hit it, but we won't waste a lot of time when we know these other things are way more.
Gotcha. That's a really good tip for any new teachers that might be watching live tonight or the replay. That's a good strategy to be able to get together with your grade level teammates to come up with a plan of attack of sorts if it differs from what is listed on that pacing guide. But I could
Right.
definitely see a new teacher feeling that pressure to get through the curriculum. Because I can, you don't want to get behind, you don't want to be the person who doesn't finish, you want to make a good impression, it's your first school year. And so that can really alter how new teachers teach, and I think how they view their role in the profession. Is it one of using the knowledge I gained in my college level degree in the classroom, or is it just following the instructions that I'm given to make sure that I'm meeting this standard? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. The one of the things I remember in my college program was the ability to be really creative in my lesson planning and crafting my units for my students. And I do feel like the longer I've been in education, the less time I have for that,
Mm.
unless I'm going to use time outside of school hours. And, you know, that works for a few teachers, but it doesn't work for a lot, especially me now. I'm married, I have kids,
Mhm.
I'm involved in my church and in my community. So I don't have the time anymore. I don't think pacing guys leave a lot of room for the kids to be creative and to learn how to problem solve and to learn how to develop their collaboration skills. Especially the biggest group that I feel like this impacts the worst is the gifted and talented kids. The kids that we typically label on the higher end of the spectrum, the ones we look at to be our doctors, our lawyers, our astronauts, our professionals. Having this type of pacing guide really kind of constricts some of those problem solving things that they need to work on while they're in school.
That's interesting. I really never even thought about the gifted and talented kiddos? Because I know in some schools, if you have that program, then your kid gets pulled out of their regular classroom to go to a separate classroom and work on things. And I've never taken part and observed what happens in the classroom. You just assume it must be brilliant work going on because the gifted and talented kids are in there. So do you have experience in that classroom itself or any training in that area to kind of have an idea of what that looks like as far as the kids, the students' perspective?
Now, yeah, I am gifted certified. I've been gifted certified for I don't know how many years. Um, and so there are different ways to serve the gifted and talented students. Different kind of programs. You have programs where they get pulled out of class. Usually, this happens on the lower end, elementary school, some middle school. And then as they get older, that usually evolves into just more specialized courses, like your honors course, gifted courses have that label. Your AP courses tend to be where the gifted kids go.
So even
Um,
those classrooms have pacing guides too, those AP honors courses.
Absolutely. And in those classes, those pacing guides are the most strict that need to be followed, especially in AP when you get on the high school level.
Yeah. And then we have a comment in the Facebook chat from D. Not only the gifted and talented are impacted, but also the ESOL, so the English as second language, and then also the students with learning disabilities as well. So that word differentiation pops into mind. I know that was like huge when I first in differentiated instruction. When I first entered into education as a speech therapist, I had to sit in on those staff meetings as well and trainings and differentiated instruction. You want to make sure you meet every kid where they are. Do these pacing guides allow that flexibility in it to meet kids where they are as you're trying to stay on track?
So it could. A lot of these things are teacher dependent. And team dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So first depends on the individual teacher. Again, that creativity part. How creative can you be in making sure Dee says no, absolutely not. But no, as the individual teacher, how creative can you be in taking a concept and finding different access points for different kids
Mm-hmm.
to get to that concept, to get into that concept? That takes, again, I'm using this word creativity because I feel like that is a lot of what's missing sometimes in education. And then beyond the individual teacher, okay, what team are you on? So if you may not be that creative person, is there somebody on your team? Is there somebody you know teaching the same thing that you guys can collaborate to talk about? But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is, when is that time
Right,
to
because
do
we
that?
talked about that a couple
Yeah.
episodes ago. The time constraints are real in the world of
Yes.
education. So when do you have that time to do that? That's so interesting. And I think sometimes parents, when you come in for parent teacher conferences and a teacher says, well, your son or daughter is behind. And so I feel like there's more to the conversation. Of course, the parent might ask, in what ways? Let me see some work samples. The teacher might share some work samples. But when we use that term behind, are we comparing where the student is to where they should be as aligned with this pacing guide? Or what is that comparison to make sure that when we say behind, that we're using that word in a very strategic and meaningful way? Because it could just mean that we're supposed to be at this point and your child isn't ready for this point. So does that mean that they're behind, or is this pacing guide not taking into account the types of students and their learning abilities in your classroom? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a really good point. in order to say something is behind, that means something is being compared to something else.
Definitely.
And so I think we really have to be intentional about what are we comparing these kids to, or this class to, this content to. Differentiation is still a buzzword. Okay. Like, I think it's the longest standing buzzword in education. But because it's so important,
Yeah.
everything is so individualized these days. You have a cell phone that caters to what you like it's programmed to pick up on your consistencies and all those things. So we try to bring that into education for the kids. I
Mhm.
just think the container of education, the way that it is right now, is not the best container to hold that. And so from that, we have the birth of these charter schools, of different types of alternative schools, private schools, like all these different things. And I mean, a lot of them are successful in
Mhm.
what they do. But I think we have to be careful about saying your child is behind because we're comparing that kid to some other kids just because they're the same age.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to also kind of note, you mentioned the different types of schools that parents could, elect to have their kids attend. There's lottery systems involved with a lot of them. Some parents have chosen to homeschool their kids, just keep them home so
Mhm.
that they can educate them the way they feel is best for them. And I feel like all of that, whether you decide to go to a charter school, a private school, a Montessori school, homeschool, a micro school, whatever it is, you're trying to find that educational facility that will cater to your child's learning, their personality, and just their overall just personification, like who they are as a person, tapping into that, and
Right.
not just using this arbitrary measuring stick, this such as this pacing guide, to kind of say this is where you should be. You're not here. You're behind. What are we going to do to get you caught up? And sometimes that is special ed. And that's when we said at the top of the episode, you either get it, you get left behind, or you get sped up. And so I know we're going to talk about special ed much deeper in an upcoming episode, but the special ed path is looked at after, of course, trying lots of different things. But again, sometimes it could just be that this measuring stick we're using to say you need to be here and you should know this at this point, and when you don't and you can't catch up, then now we need to give you alternative instruction. Do they really just need things slowed down a little bit for them? Maybe things are too fast in the classroom, and it's not because something's wrong with the student. It could be something wrong with the approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Whew.
interesting. I know we always like to end with some solutions. So, a lot of the topics that we discuss, there's not going to be this quick fix, magic wand type of solution. It's going to be strategies you can implement over time to help either lighten your load, make changes slowly. So, what do you have for the teachers that are feeling kind of the weight of these pacing guides and it kind of hovering over them in a sense?
So when you asked me, like, did I learn this lesson early? And I was like, yeah, I did. I think one of those lessons in particular was to be okay with where your students are, as long as you're okay with what you've done as the teacher and how you have approached teaching these kids. So we know that all kids are different, and or why else would we even be talking about differentiation?
Exactly.
So just know your students and get to understand where they need their help, and be okay with doing the best you can to help them
Mhm.
where they are. I think the most important thing is to make sure that a kid grows with you in their knowledge and does not stay stagnant, or even worse, regress in their
Mhm.
learning. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the most important. And then, you know, all teachers whether you went through an education system or not, once you get a year or two under your belt, like, you now have teacher knowledge that you can use. You have been in situations that you've learned from that experience. So just remember that, you've gone through it and you're still here, which means that something worked at some point. So make a habit of reflecting on that and stay creative. Creativity is like one of the best things. And I don't just mean be creative in what you're teaching. That's important. But be creative in how you view the students. The
Mhm.
last episode before our 10th episode, we talked about really getting to understand your students as a human, as a whole person, instead of just a brain that you need to dump knowledge in. So
Yeah. I think those are really good tips and strategies. I know I usually give strategies for parents who might be watching. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. If you're meeting with a teacher and she's saying your child is behind, ask questions. What does that mean behind? Get some evidence of that notion that your child is behind. Ask for those work samples. Ask to see what would be expected at this point versus where your child is so that you can make some comparisons and ask questions. And then be ready to share strengths that your child has that you see at home. So I always like to have parents come in ready to share and not just be a vessel to just take information in, but talk about what you see your child being able to do at home. Share those things with the teacher so then you all can start to work together to build on those strengths that you see at home in the classroom. And I think
mhm.
that can go a long way to building the relationships, like we talked about before. The relationship exists not only between the teacher and the student, but also between the teacher and the family as well. So
Right.
definitely ask questions and then be ready to share what you see your child's strengths are, and you all work together to come up with a plan. And again, these aren't quick fixes, these are things that need to be implemented consistently over time to see any real result from them. So I feel like this was a really great topic. I know we got some comments in the chat. If you know anyone who is in education or a parent, share this episode with them so that they can gain some knowledge, not only about what pacing guides are, most teachers are familiar with that, parents may not be. And
Mhm.
then also from the teacher side, some of these strategies that Valerie suggested to just help get creative, I think will go a really long way.
Absolutely. To just real highlight something that you said that I absolutely love is parents, you are your child's first advocate. And so, whatever the situation is at school, like Tiffany said, let the teacher know the things that you see. We did an episode where we talked about the kids and their strengths, but sometimes those strengths don't appear to be strengths. They often are viewed as negative. And you just have to look a little deeper sometimes. And so, parents can give insight to teachers that we can't necessarily see in just a short amount of time during the day.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was a great episode. Again, share, make sure that you are sharing this on Facebook. If you're watching on LinkedIn, sharing there as well. And of course on YouTube. And then we will see you all next week on Tuesday for Tuesday Talks.
All right, you guys, bye.